on this video I'm going to explain the process of fermentation as well as feed a little bit of my sourdough starter. So the process of fermentation is used by all organisms who do not have the ability to make energy using oxygen, or for those who do have the ability but do not have an oxygen. So when the yeast in this sourdough runs out of oxygen, it will begin to ferment, which is why we see the little CO2 bubbles. The organisms that are necessary for this sourdough to be successful are lactobacilli, whose Latin name is Lactobacillus, as well as wild yeast, whose Latin name is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right. The sourdough will rise because the lactobacilli in the sourdough will break down the flour into simple sugars, and then the wild yeast will use those simple sugars in the process of fermentation, which will release CO2. Then the elastic wheat gluten in the bread dough will trap those CO2, which will allow it to inflate and rise. The sourdough is sour, however, because the lactobacilli produces lactic acid, which gives it a sour flavor. So basically, when I feed my starter flour and water, the lactobacilli will then use the flour to break it down to food for the wild yeast, who will then release CO2, which will allow it to rise and be sour, and you'll have a delicious sourdough bread in the end. So now I'm going to feed my sourdough, and my dad is going to come in and say some things.
So Emma's been working on this for a long time. She's been feeding her starter on a regular basis and making a big mess and occasionally cleaning up. There were a few rough days when things weren't changing that much, but as you can see from the final product, it turned out pretty well.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
And that is it for this video. Hope you enjoyed.